I'm chatting with a member of the church I serve. The hymn, "Be Ours a Religion," comes up. Look of disgust crosses her face. "I do not like that hymn," she says. This is a member who is more engaged in the life of our congregation than most. She has a strong UU identity and is active in the greater community. So I'm curious why she doesn't appreciate the sweeping call of this hymn that asks us to live our religion boldly and to cross lines that divide us more frequently. "What's not to like?" I ask. "It's so saccharine," she says. "Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere." "Do you know the origin of those words?" I ask. "Have you told us?" she counters. So let it be known by all who have not yet been told, the words are from Theodore Parker, the 19th century Unitarian minister, abolitionist, reformer, activist, who preached the prophetic imperative as much as any other minister in our liberal religious history. It was Parker, after all, who first spoke about the moral arc of the universe being long, but bending toward justice, words that have been echoed by many, from Reverend Dr. King to President Obama. When Parker proclaimed, "Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere," he was not preaching saccharine, and he was not being hippy-dippy, as another member recently described the hymn to me. He was encouraging us to let our religion infuse everything we do so that we will better serve this common life that we share. "Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love." When I found Unitarian Universalism at the age of 29, I confess I didn't need its sunshine to go everywhere. I mostly just needed it to illuminate the possibilities of my own life. That was enough. I'd spent most of the previous decade avoiding religion. I still held many of the values I had received growing up in Christian congregations: the importance of loving my neighbor, the need for compassion, the necessity of forgiveness. But I had come to see that ideas about God, held too tightly, were often divisive and sometimes dangerous. Could there be a religion that would leave space for believers and non-believers alike? A religion that would leave space for me? I found that space in my first UU congregation, the Community Church of New York. I remember my first Sunday there, how moved I was by all the banners representing world religions hanging from the rafters. How delighted I was by the evidence in the hymnal that theological diversity was welcomed. Unitarian Universalism clicked with me. It clicked because I knew that I had the freedom to believe not on someone else's terms and with their terms, but on my own and with my own. And I knew others had the same opportunity, and that it was better for us all that we were doing it together. A year after walking into community church, I enrolled at Meadville Lombard Theological School. And these 13 years since graduating, I have served church where we have done much of what I believe I was called to do. Together, we have grown the presence of our religion in Des Moines. Together, we have welcomed hundreds of new UUs into our congregation. And together, we have changed lives. We've had to take some bold steps. We've had to let go of some of the old ways that were not helpful to our mission or welcoming to newcomers. We've made decisions so that ours could be a religion that would, like sunshine, go everywhere, or at least go more places than it used to. But I've come to understand that we have just begun to live what this religion really asks of us. And I'm guessing the same thing may be true in the congregations that you call home. We tell ourselves that we want to be a religion for our time, but mostly we play small. We self-deprecate and we make excuses for ourselves. We're just a tiny religion, we say, as if that's all we're called to be, satisfied with welcoming just a few members a year. We shrink from taking risks, fearing that not everyone will agree, as if anything worth doing has ever received universal agreement. We quibble over logos and buildings and which names for the holy belong in our services and which names don't. And perhaps our greatest stumbling block, we say we promote religious freedom, yet we too often don't want to be in the company of people practicing faiths other than our own. I know that last one well because I've lived it. At the end of my first year of ministry, I was invited by a leader of Amos, our local congregation-based community organizing effort, to attend a 3-day training in the principles of organizing. At that time, no one from our church was participating in Amos and its more than 24 member congregations. The first day of the training, I introduced myself as a UU minister. One longtime Amos leader, a respected Methodist colleague in town, ribbed me in front of everyone, saying, "UUs aren't sure why we are a religion." I tried to take his teasing in stride. He just didn't get it, I assured myself. As the training continued, I learned what it means to be a citizen. I learned about the importance of public life, and I was reminded of the prophetic imperative, the call to live in service to the vision of beloved community of love and justice, the call that I recognized at the core of our UU principles and history. And I was also invited to pray, probably just a few times during the 3 days, but that felt like a lot. I pushed back, telling the organizers, I'm not sure how this is going to go over with the congregation I serve. Do we have to pray so much? These good people just looked at me funny, like I was a vegan expecting to be served in a steakhouse. I had to do some soul searching. Mark, I thought, you can't claim to value religious freedom and crossing the theological lines that divide us if you're going to be put off by other people practicing their religion. Can't you leave them some space? Why does this have to be about you? At the end of the training, I had much to think about. Maybe my colleague was right after all. Maybe I, too, was one of those UUs who weren't sure why we were a religion. I returned to the church agitated and inspired. The congregation had told me they wanted to be more known in the community. They wanted to be more active, more visible. I saw involvement in Amos as a way to do that. So I started bringing members with me to actions and to trainings, and each time we began or ended a meeting, we were invited to pray, usually by a Christian minister who would use words like Heavenly Father and include lines like, Lord, help us do your will. I could see the discomfort in the faces of many of my friends. Afterwards, they would tell me how awkward they felt, and I told them the same thing I had told myself. Give those of different faiths who share our interest in working for justice and building the beloved community the space to be who they are. This isn't about you. This isn't about us. This is about the work that we are called to do. Well, some couldn't get beyond hearing religious language that stirred up complicated emotions and past trauma. I understood. But many of us did not have to work quite so hard to stay, and so we did. And more than a decade later, our congregation remains a vital, active member of Amos. We are no longer known in the community as the people who don't pray. or the people who aren't sure why we are a religion. We are known as the people who show up, the people who get things done. Along with the member congregations of Amos, we've contributed to improvements in our local justice and mental health care systems. We've challenged the institutions of the labor market to work for the underemployed. We've launched school mediation programs. We've expanded the charity care agreements of area hospitals. But perhaps most importantly, we've learned how to focus more on growing our own faithful UU commitments than on being put off by the commitments of others. We found that our works of love include staying in relationship with those we might otherwise avoid. We've seen that when we live our UU faith in public with generosity, with compassion, when we set aside our theological differences long enough to discover what we share, we can be difference makers. We can be the yeast in the loaf. Mark, that person is a member of your church? That person too? I hear that a lot. Our Amos partners have been shocked, not only by the talent and the commitment that UUs bring to the table, but also by our influence. Our membership does not just include the grassroots. We often have the grass tops too. We have those not only impacted by decisions of the powerful, we have decision makers as well. And with this privilege, even in our relatively small numbers, comes great responsibility. When I've asked UUs around the country why their congregations are not members of their local interfaith organizing efforts like Amos, I've heard lots of responses. Well, their groups are too Christian, or their local groups aren't diverse enough, or intentionally anti-racist enough, or they won't work on LGBT issues or reproductive rights. These differences can be challenging and painful. This I know. Still, I don't think they should keep us from the work that we can do together. We can't be the difference makers our religion asks us to be if we won't show up, leave space for others, respectfully add our voices to the mix. We can't be difference makers if we won't generously engage with those who don't agree with us on all matters. We can't be difference makers if we are only talking to ourselves. I remember the first one-to-one meeting I had with a non-denominational Pentecostal pastor whose congregation had just started getting involved with Amos. I anticipated he might not share my very public support of same-sex marriage, so I brought it up. I said, we may have different views on marriage equality, but that's not a subject that Amos is working on right now, so I don't want that to come between us. He agreed, and it hasn't. Over the years, since that first meeting, I have served on a team with him, along with pastors from Seventh-day Adventist and African Methodist Episcopal congregations, building together from scratch a workforce development initiative that has helped nearly 100 Iowans move from dead-end jobs to living wage careers. Along the way, I have been humbled by how these pastors have put aside their differences with me to work toward the common good. How they have made their own compromises to stay at the table. How they have modeled for me what it means to be in community. Collaborating with them has actually strengthened my faith because I have seen yet again how our different views of the holy matter less than what those views lead us to do. My experiences with them remind me of something a church member shared with me not long after we joined Amos. His words have stayed with me because they echo the same discovery that many of us have made in this interfaith work for justice. He said, I used to think that Christians were good people despite their faith. Now I know they are good people because of their faith. Come on now. This isn't just about what we have learned. The members of other congregations and faith traditions in town have come to know much more about who we are as Unitarian Universalists too. They can see that ours is a religion committed to bringing about a better world. They can see that ours is a humble, open religion, less focused on a specific understanding of God or no God than on what we can do and become together. This is the religion that clicked with me those many years ago, the religion that leaves space, the religion that reaches out in love. This is the religion I believe we must be more often if we are to stay relevant in a world where we can no longer afford to remain cloistered in the so-called comfort of like-minded people. Now, I know that some may be hesitant about participating in interfaith organizing, fearing that we may be distracted from acting on behalf of the causes for which we may not easily find partners. I understand that time is a limited resource. There's only so much a congregation can do. However, I have found that my experiences with Amos have led me to be bolder in my other justice commitments. My Amos work has helped me shape my public voice of faith and taught me how to navigate the tension that comes when I don't know what to do, but I know that something must be done. One example. After marriage equality had come to Iowa, I attended a subcommittee meeting at the Iowa State House on a proposed ban on same-sex marriage and civil unions. In order to secure a seat in the small room where the meeting was scheduled, I arrived 90 minutes early, requiring me to sit for a nearly 90-minute long prayer meeting held by a non-denominational group. I took my seat in a chair against the wall, along with some other marriage equality supporters who also wanted to be sure to have a seat for the meeting that would follow. The dozen or so members of the group doing the praying sat at a big table in the middle, and they traded off extemporaneous prayers for our legislators, for our country, for our state, for each other, for unborn children, confessing their love for all people, their desire that the meeting that would follow would be civil and that all voices would be heard. At one point, the state representative who was chairman of the subcommittee entered the room. It seemed the prayer group had invited him. They put their hands on him and they prayed. Then he shared his position with the group that the people of Iowa should have the right to vote to take away the rights of others. Soon he left, and the group continued their praying. I remained silent, taking in the scene, thinking of my time in the room as an opportunity to meditate on the complicated humanity and inherent worth and dignity of my neighbors. Just past the 1 hour mark, one of my fellow marriage equality activists leaned over to me. She said, "Mark, I'll give you $5 if you offer a prayer." I brushed off the offer. At the time, I didn't think it was my place to invade their prayer meeting when my theology was so clearly different. But just a few minutes later, after one of them offered a prayer for those perverting the Lord's sexual intentions, I couldn't help myself. I broke a moment of silence with a prayer for all the couples I have had the privilege to marry and for their families. A prayer of celebration for them receiving the rights and the benefits and the equal treatment that they have deserved for so long. I offered words of gratitude to live in a state where this is possible, and and to be able to be at that State House that day in support. And I prayed that we could all be inspired and motivated by the spirit of love. I didn't get that $5. Oh, but I got a lot more. Even with my friends beside me, I felt really alone in that prayer meeting until I was able to respectfully participate on behalf of my faith. My faith. I felt alone until I lived my religion so that it could, like sunshine, go everywhere. Did my prayer alter the thinking of that prayer group? Probably not. But it did change the energy of the room and lift the spirits of those who were present on behalf of equality, including me. Many years ago, a retired minister shared with me that her interfaith work in the community had saved her. It had saved her. At the time, I thought her testimony was a bit dramatic. I assumed that maybe she had been, frustrated by the congregation she was serving. She just wanted to get away from them. But I believe I now know what she meant. She was saved by her interfaith organizing and public witness because it is the work through which we shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. It is the work through which the visible and the invisible come together in common cause to produce the miraculous. It is the work that can save us too, for it is the work through which we can give ourselves to something larger than ourselves, finding through this giving that our deepest needs are met. So let's give ourselves more often to the possibilities of collaboration. Let's be witnesses for our faith in this troubled world. Let's put aside our discomfort with difference, taking the risk to work with those who are willing to work with us, letting that work agitate and inspire and transform us. Let's choose to be the religion that we know we are called to be. The religion whose love reaches out. Whose love reaches out. The religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love.